My wife came out as transgender. What does this mean for us? My wife and I have been married for 3 years, and we dated for 2 years before that. From the outside looking in, ours seemed like a normal, happy marriage. She's always been incredibly beautiful and feminine, and throughout our relationship, there was never any indication that she was questioning her gender. At least, that's what I thought, until last night. It started when she said she needed to talk about something important. We sat down, and she hesitated for a moment before saying, "I think I might be trans." I'll admit, my initial reaction was completely wrong. I laughed, not because I was trying to be hurtful, but because it caught me so off guard. To me, it felt like it came out of nowhere, and I assumed she had to be joking. But she wasn't joking. My reaction upset her, understandably so, and the conversation quickly became tense. I apologized for laughing, but she remained upset, and the discussion didn't go much smoother from there. I tried to ask questions to understand what she was feeling, but the answers left me more confused than anything. When I asked her why she felt like a man, she couldn't give me a clear explanation. When I asked if she planned to transition, she said she wasn't sure yet. I even asked if she was still in love with me and attracted to me, and she said yes. We continued talking, and I did my best to listen and be respectful. But the truth is, I was struggling to process everything. It felt like my world had been flipped upside down in the span of a single conversation. The more we talked, the more I realized how much this revelation was affecting me. I couldn't wrap my head around it. My wife had never shown any signs of questioning her gender before. Not in her behavior, her appearance, or her interests. Nothing about her seemed even remotely masculine to me. I know that not everyone fits neatly into traditional gender roles, but this felt like it came completely out of left field. What upset me the most was the uncertainty of it all. She said she wasn't sure if she would transition, but just imagining the possibility overwhelmed me. I couldn't stop picturing her taking hormones, growing body hair, or having surgery to remove her breasts. It wasn't just about the physical changes, though. If she decided she truly wanted to live as a man, it would feel like I was losing the person I married. I want to be clear, I have nothing against trans people. I believe everyone has the right to live authentically and pursue what makes them happy. But this was personal. The thought of my wife becoming someone I might not recognize, someone I might not even be attracted to, was devastating. I felt trapped between wanting to support her and the realization that I might not be able to make our relationship work if this was the path she chose. By the time the conversation ended, I was emotionally drained. She went to work the next morning, but I couldn't bring myself to go in. I called out, spent the day at home, and tried to process everything. But instead of finding clarity, I found myself spiraling. I cried, drank more than I should have, and couldn't stop thinking about how my life might be about to change in ways I wasn't prepared for. As I sat alone, my thoughts kept circling back to the same questions. How had this never come up before? Why now? Was there something I'd missed all these years? I felt blindsided, like the foundation of my marriage had been shaken without warning. And while I wanted to support my wife, I couldn't ignore the anger and sadness bubbling beneath the surface. I was angry because I didn't sign up for this. When we got married, I thought I knew who she was, and I built my life around that. The idea that she might transition into someone fundamentally different felt like a betrayal, even if I knew, logically, it wasn't her fault. It wasn't about what I thought she should be. It was about losing the relationship as I knew it. The sadness, though, was harder to deal with. I love her deeply, and the thought of our marriage ending because of something neither of us can control broke my heart. At the same time, I couldn't ignore the fact that I'm not attracted to men. If she truly wanted to live as a man, I didn't see how we could stay together. It felt like an impossible situation, one where no one was really at fault, but everyone was hurt. By the end of the day, I was emotionally drained and no closer to finding answers. I knew we needed to have more conversations, but I also knew that I wasn't ready for them yet. I needed time to process what she told me and figure out how I really felt about it. For now, all I could do was hope that, somehow, we'd find a way through this, together or apart. I secretly got a paternity test on my son. 2 years ago, my wife, Maria, and I welcomed our son into the world. A moment that should have been nothing but joy. But from the very beginning, something felt off. Our baby boy didn't look anything like us. While I understand that newborns often grow into their features and may not immediately resemble their parents, this was different. Maria and I both have a medium olive complexion, closer to someone like Salma Hayek, with dark brown eyes and black or dark brown hair. Our families are the same. Both her Colombian parents and my Mexican parents share these traits, with only minor variations like my mom's hazel eyes. Yet here was our son, blonde, blue-eyed, and fair-skinned. At first, I brushed it off. People assured me that babies can look completely different from their parents and that their features, like eye and hair color, often change over time. Just give it a couple of years, they'd say. And I tried. I really did. But as time went on, my doubts grew stronger. Instead of darkening, his eyes became an even brighter blue. His hair stayed blonde, and his complexion remained light. By his second birthday, he looked nothing like Maria or me, and I couldn't ignore the whispers in my head, or from other people, any longer. The comments from strangers didn't help. At the park, someone once asked me if the child I was playing with was my son. Maria has been mistaken for his nanny on more than one occasion. And then there were the jokes, family members teasingly calling him the mailman's kid, or giving me strange looks. I laughed it off outwardly, but inside, it stung. The doubt began to eat away at me, even though I had no solid reason to believe Maria had ever been unfaithful. The more I tried to ignore it, the louder the doubt became. I started overanalyzing everything, from his features to the way strangers interacted with us. I convinced myself I was overreacting, but the nagging feeling wouldn't let go. Maria, on the other hand, didn't seem fazed by any of it. Whenever someone made a comment or joke about our son's appearance, she would laugh it off and tell me not to take it so seriously. "People are just playing around," she'd say with a shrug. But I couldn't just shrug it off. I felt like people were silently judging me, thinking I was raising another man's child. It got to the point where I started to avoid certain social situations because I couldn't handle the stares or comments. Still, I couldn't bring myself to confront Maria about it. She had never given me any reason to think she cheated, and accusing her of something so serious felt wrong. But the doubt persisted, and eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. One day, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. Without telling Maria, I took our son to get a paternity test. I knew it was a huge step, a breach of trust, but I convinced myself it was the only way to silence the doubts and protect my peace of mind. If the test confirmed he was mine, I could finally move forward without questioning everything. If it didn't, well, I didn't let myself think about that possibility. When the results came back, they hit me like a ton of bricks. He was 100% my son. Every bit of doubt I'd carried for 2 years melted away in that instant. I was so relieved I wanted to show the results to everyone who had ever made a comment or joke about him not being mine. I felt vindicated, like I could finally hold my head high as his father without questioning it for even a second. That night, feeling a weight lifted off my shoulders, I brought up the idea of a paternity test casually with Maria, just to gauge her reaction. "Hey," I said, trying to sound lighthearted. "Would you have been upset if I'd gotten a paternity test when our son was born?" Her reaction wasn't what I expected. Maria looked at me, visibly offended, and asked, "Why would you even think to do something like that? Do you really think I'd cheat on you?" Her words hit me harder than I anticipated. She went on to say that if I had doubted her, it would have shaken her trust in our relationship. To her, the very idea of me considering a paternity test was a betrayal. Caught off guard, I played it off as a joke, laughing nervously and quickly changing the subject, but her words stayed with me long after the conversation ended. She was right. I'd done the test without any real reason other than my own insecurities about our son's appearance. Maria had never given me a single reason to question her loyalty or integrity, yet I'd let the doubts creep in anyway. What I'd replaced those doubts with, however, was a heavy sense of guilt. I felt like I'd let her down, like I'd been unfair to the person who had always stood by me. I had my answer now. Our son was unquestionably mine, but at what cost? I'd done something behind her back that could have serious consequences if she ever found out. Now I'm left wondering what to do. Should I come clean and tell her about the test, risking her trust and potentially damaging our relationship? Or should I keep it to myself and carry this guilt in silence? Either way, I feel like I've backed myself into a corner, and there's no easy way out. Would I be the asshole if I leave without saying anything? I'm 28, a law student, and like most students, I've been drowning in stress over the past few semesters. Balancing heavy coursework and looming deadlines has taken a toll, and I desperately needed a break. When I vented to my dad, who's 70, about how overwhelmed I was, he had the perfect solution. An invitation to spend 3 weeks at our family's beach house on the Atlantic coast. His partner, Maria, 63, would be joining us, and honestly, the idea of relaxing at the beach sounded like exactly what I needed. I agreed immediately. A few weeks of fishing, hiking, and listening to the waves sounded like the perfect escape. But about a week before the trip, my dad dropped a surprise. Maria's daughter, Sophia, who's 42, and her 2 sons, aged 10 and 8, would also be joining us for Christmas. My initial reaction? Pure dread. I didn't want to share my getaway with 2 young kids. They'll drive me crazy, I told my dad, but he reassured me they were well behaved, and I reluctantly decided to give it a shot. The first week of the trip was everything I'd hoped for. With just my dad, Maria, and me, the house was peaceful. We spent our days fishing at the stream, hiking in the woods, and enjoying the sound of birdsong. I felt like I could finally breathe. But then Christmas came, and everything changed. The well-behaved kids my dad had described turned out to be anything but. They couldn't go more than a few seconds without screaming at each other, and every meal or bathroom trip left the house in chaos. Worst of all, Sophia kept them glued to their tablets and phones all day to keep them out of her hair. The constant noise, loud, obnoxious music and video game sound effects was enough to make me want to pull my hair out. I tried to tolerate the chaos, but it didn't take long before I started cracking. The house, once peaceful and serene, now felt like a battleground of noise and disorder. The kids' constant fighting was bad enough, but the mess they left behind after every meal or activity pushed me over the edge. Sophia didn't seem to care. As long as they were glued to their screens and out of her way, she was happy. Meanwhile, I felt like I was losing my mind. One afternoon, while it was just my dad and me at the house, I vented my frustrations. "This is unbearable," I told him. "I'm seriously considering heading home early." My dad, ever the peacemaker, said he understood but suggested I explain my decision to Sophia and Maria so they wouldn't feel hurt. That idea didn't sit well with me. "I don't owe them an explanation," I replied. To me, my mental well-being came first. Later that evening, my dad invited me to go flashlight fishing at the stream, just the 2 of us. I agreed, thinking it would be a good chance to escape the madness and spend some quality father-son time. As we fished under the stars, my dad brought up the topic again. He admitted he'd noticed my discomfort and asked if I could make an emotional effort for the sake of harmony. His reasoning? Kids are kids. I couldn't hold back my frustration. "That's just a bullshit excuse for bad parenting," I said. I pointed out how, when my sister and I were kids, we had strict rules about screen time and noise levels. We weren't allowed to disturb others or leave the house in disarray. My dad listened and acknowledged my points, but he also reminded me of something. Unlike me, he could simply unplug himself by turning off his hearing aids. He was clearly making an effort to make the vacation work for everyone, and I appreciated that. Inspired by his willingness to compromise, I decided to follow suit. I resolved to sit down with the family, explain my feelings, and try to find a middle ground. It wasn't going to be easy, but I figured it was worth a shot. Despite my determination to have an honest conversation with the family, things quickly spiraled out of control. 2 events happened back to back, and any hope I had for compromise went right out the window. First, I called my grandfather to wish him a happy new year. During our conversation, I realized his Alzheimer's was progressing much faster than I'd anticipated. He struggled to remember one of my cousin's names, and it hit me hard. Suddenly, spending time with him felt far more important than staying at the beach house. The thought of him losing his cognition completely filled me with sadness, and I decided I wanted to prioritize being with him while he was still himself. Second, while I was napping to try and clear my head, the kids started fighting over the TV remote. Their usual shouting escalated into a physical brawl, and before I knew it, things were flying across the room. I tried to ignore it until a sneaker landed on my leg, just inches away from a very sensitive area. That was the final straw. Overwhelmed by the stress of university, the emotional weight of my grandfather's health, and the non-stop chaos of the house, I snapped. I got up, silently packed my things, and prepared to leave. Before heading out, I apologized to my dad, explaining that the vacation just wasn't working for me. Then I made my way to the bus station. As I sat on the bus heading home, I couldn't help but replay everything that had happened over the past few weeks. The first part of the trip had been incredible, exactly the peaceful escape I'd needed. But the chaos that followed once Sophia and her kids arrived completely ruined the experience. It wasn't just about the noise or the mess. It was the lack of boundaries and parenting that pushed me to my breaking point. The truth is, I felt a little guilty for leaving so abruptly. My dad had clearly been trying to balance everyone's needs, and I knew he'd be disappointed that I didn't stick it out. But at the same time, I knew staying any longer would have taken a serious toll on my mental health. I needed space to process everything: my grandfather's declining health, the stress of university, and the fact that the vacation I'd been looking forward to had turned into such a disaster. Adding to the tension, Sophia reached out a few days later with a new request. She wanted to use the beach house for a few days during February, which is my designated month to do whatever I want with it. I'd already planned to rent it out to tourists for extra income, so I politely told her the nightly rate was $55. Her response was far from polite. She called me and said she'd expected me to let her stay for free because we're family. I calmly explained that $55 was already a favor, given that the house's amenities usually justified a rate of $65 during peak season. She hung up without another word, leaving me to wonder what she'd try next. After Sophia hung up, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of it. I'd already booked the house for tourists during February, and I had no intention of canceling those reservations to accommodate her last-minute demands. The beach house is as much mine as it is my dad's and my sister's, and we'd worked hard to fix it up and turn it into a source of income. Letting Sophia stay for free felt unfair, especially after everything that had happened during the vacation. Still, I worried about how far she might push things. What if she showed up at the house unannounced? What if I had to involve the authorities to get her to leave? The thought of dealing with that kind of drama was exhausting, but I resolved to stand my ground. Boundaries are important, even with family. Despite the frustration, I tried to focus on the positives. The first week at the beach house reminded me of how much I value peaceful, quality time with my dad. It also gave me clarity about where my priorities lie. Spending time with my grandfather is now at the top of my list, and I'm determined to make the most of the time we have left together. For now, I'm choosing to let the drama go and concentrate on what matters most. Sophia might not understand my decisions, but that's okay. I've learned that you can't please everyone, and sometimes the best thing you can do is prioritize your own well-being.